Hello and welcome to ZDTV. My name is Skip Barr, and I'll take you through the required steps to utilize the NetFoundry platform for network access. Today's technical session will demonstrate how to use the NetFoundry platform to securely access your private APIs in AWS. As the API universe continues to grow exponentially, it is imperative that organizations use networking layer 3 methods to secure private APIs in the cloud or data center. The Zero Trust API fabric can be implemented agentless or with agents to secure any API. Best of all, you get to close all inbound firewall ports and create one rule: deny all. Now let's take a look at the platform and the solution. As you can see on this diagram, we have remote users, endpoints, and identities in NetFoundry terms that can actually partake in the network on the edge. Additionally, we have a data center portrayed in this diagram, and we have public cloud. So we essentially have a hybrid cloud with an edge element on each side. The fabric in the middle behaves like a transit data plane for all traffic. These NetFoundry edge routers resources are placed in regions nearest your cloud and your data centers and your remote consumers. The ZigGui character represents a developer or an API consumer who can access private APIs over the NetFoundry platform. So this demo assumes you have created a free Teams account in NetFoundry, and to get started, you need to have an organization created. And let's get started by logging into our account. I'll type in my organization, login credentials, and we'll get going here. During this demo, we'll pause for each step to allow for resource creation and to resume through all the steps. First, you will create the network, which takes around 5 to 8 minutes, basically the time it takes to spin up an instance in a cloud. The web console automation will deploy a dedicated network controller into your account. This controller is deployed into the NetFoundry tenancy and is managed by NetFoundry as part of the base product. Hit the plus sign in the upper left corner to add a network. Give it a name. Select the cloud controller cloud provider, AWS or OCI. I'm choosing OCI. Choose a region where the majority of your traffic will be participating. I'll just leave it as Ashburn, and I'll hit create my network. This will take 5 or 8 minutes before we can move on any further. So I'll pause the video during this time. Okay, so once you've see that your network's been created, you'll notice a green globe up here in the upper left-hand corner that essentially is indicating that you've built your controller. And if we take a look at our diagram, we've built a network controller for this fabric. Now, what we need to do, and for this exercise, we're going to create a transit router for all the edge to connect to and connect out of. We're also going to connect an customer edge router in AWS, and we're going to put an identity on the laptop for Mr. ZigGui here to be able to communicate all the way to the cloud. So let's just go back to our dashboard, and we'll install a edge router. So we'll go to edge routers. Notice it says edge router up here, and then edge router policies. So our edge router is going to be essentially, what we're going to create is a transit router, and a transit router performs as a network on-ramp or off-ramp for edge connectivity. In this case, the cloud is the destination. So the Fabric Transit Router is NetFoundry hosted and is also managed within the NetFoundry tenancy. So you create it up here by selecting the plus sign. Then you say, we'll call this Fabric Router. And this also takes about 5 or 8 minutes for it to create. And then we'll come over here into NetFoundry hosted and say OCI, that's fine. I'll choose Ashburn again. Seems that we're all I'm on the East Coast here, so we'll choose, I can choose anyone. I can choose AWS. My controller, I think, is in AWS. And let's just say we go to Ashburn again. So hit create. Now, what that essentially is going to do is create my fabric. Now that in terms of the zero trust networking, that is essentially doesn't allow you to go transit the network until you set up a policy for it. So we'll need to set up a policy. The policy plus sign right here, and then you select a policy. I like to call it default policy. And edge router attributes. Who can participate in it? Well, there's only one in this particular instance, so I'll choose my fabric router that I built in this previous step. And then for endpoint attributes, for this demo, I want all. So I'll type in hashtag all. So that essentially allows all endpoints the ability to transit this network. Keep in mind, they still do not have access to anything yet until we give those permissions in the app WAN definitions. So we'll hit create here. There. So that'll take about 5 or 8 minutes to build as well. So the last endpoint we want to do is next edge router we want to put in place is select edge router again. We want to build the construct in the cloud for our AWS edge router. So we'll come in here. We'll type in AWS. We'll call it VPC edge router. And in this case, it's going to be customer hosted. And we'll come back over here and we'll hit create. And what this does is create an identity key, and it gives you links to all the downloads for the actual software that you deploy on the underlying resource. So there's a registration key right there. I'll grab that key and I'll plug him into a little script file I have created off to the side here. And we'll go put him like that. Oh, so we'll hit copy. All right. Copy that again. Put it over here. And there. Okay. Now, the next step is creating the endpoint. Okay, now we need an endpoint for our laptop here. And endpoint is, there's a default one that comes from the edge router we just created. Now we want to create the remote user endpoint. So I'll call this skip demo rebels net. And I don't need an attribute, but I can hit create. Same thing happens. I get a key. I get links to the installers. So you'll go to this link and you'll install this software. And then you'll get a key that you have to ingest into your application. So once you install the application, looks like something like a VPN type solution here, but you hit add identity. And then you come back in over to set, and then I'll go to general 22, then I'll do rebel net right here. So add ingest that identity, as that identity to the network. So now that endpoint is completely installed on my laptop. Now, while that's happening, we can go back, we can go over to our AWS resource and we'll go to EC2 and we'll install the underlying edge router instance right now. So we'll hit launch instance. We'll call this demo edge router. Skip. And we'll click in here, NetFoundry. That's how you do it. Get it right from the marketplace. See marketplace right here. And I'll hit select. Continue. Good. All right. So I don't need to put a big instance like this for a small demo, so I can get it scaled back a little bit. I just go to T3 medium. All right. So key pair, I happen to have a key that I can use for this. My network settings, I will edit. I will select my network. It's this WestNet. It's class C addressing. I will select, I only have the one subnet there. And I will enable a public IP, and I will select an existing group, and my existing group will have no rules. So it's you can add things like SSH if you want, but I'm going to use an install script that essentially makes it so I don't have to even touch it. And we'll come down here to advanced details, and we will load in some user data, and I will haul that in from the side here. This is a router registration script that will essentially register it without zero touch. So this is bash sudo router registration, and that'll be that key that we've previously created from the console over here. This guy or this guy. All right, so let's just go back to this and we will hit launch instance. Now, we still have this will obviously take 5 or 8 minutes to install. The fabric router looks like he has come up online, and we can begin building other elements within the cloud. So now what's our next thing? We want to build an endpoint, a VPC endpoint, so we can expose our APIs to this remote this desktop over here, 1,000 miles away. So I'll come in and I'll go to VPC, and we'll decide we're going to do endpoints, and we'll go to endpoints. Add an endpoint. We'll call this demo private API. AWS services, those are called execute API right here. Okay, good. And that's the service that we want to get after. I'll select my VPC, same thing, WestNet. We'll select that subnet that's part of it. Security group, no rules demo, same thing applies as I put to the edge router that I did. Policy full access, kind of leave them as default, and that creates that endpoint. Oh, subnet, I forgot to do that. Okay, subnet. Oh, this guy. Where does he go? Right here. All right, then we'll come back. We'll hit create endpoint, and that should go through this time. Good. All right, so now we have the endpoint. Next thing we can do is let's go to API Gateway. And we'll type that in right here, API Gateway, API Gateway, there. Okay, so REST API, we'll build one. And for this, we're just going to use an example API, the pet store, it's classic. And we'll do endpoint type. We'll do private. There we go. And we'll go import. Good. And we will go to resource policy, and we'll put in just an open resource policy. Something that looks like this. That was everything. We'll hit save. And then we will go back to APIs. Go to my pet store. And we will deploy it. We will call this demo. I don't need any descriptions. Good. This is my URL for the API, and I'll just copy this guy right here. Okay. And I'll bring my notes over. So what I'm going to do is put that API ID in here. That's the API ID in the beginning of it. And then I'll also go back and need to get my VPC ID. So I should have noted that earlier, VPC. We'll go to endpoints. Here he is. And we'll copy this guy back into this guy. Then we'll make this our, how we're going to call this demo. We're going to go API ID, and then we're going to put this in the VPC. It's just combining the two, essentially what you're doing. And then we'll put this guy in the beginning. There. So that'll be our end URL for going after the API. Okay, so next thing you want to do is we have to come back and we have to um, connect the VPC endpoint to the API gateway. And that is done with a command with AWS CLI. And what we'll do here with that command looks like this. Add the API here. Then we'll add the VPC ID here. Right here. And then we'll run this command right here. Copy from a Linux station. And hit like that. There. So that's all connected right now. And while that rest of that remains getting built in terms of the customer edge router, we'll pause for a brief moment and come back to it. Okay, so let's go back and check to see if our edge router that we deployed is up and running. Looks like it is so far. Yeah, looks like it's running. All the checks are done. Looks like, let's go check the NetFoundry console to see what it looks like here. So you'll see I have a green network. I have two endpoints, two routers, one of them being a fabric router, one of them being an edge router. And then I have the two endpoints, one being my laptop, one being the implied or automatically created endpoint from the edge router, and one policy. So from a build perspective, right now we have gotten through all of it. So we've deployed the edge router here. We've deployed the fabric router. The network is up and running, and we've deployed it in laptop identity as well. So if we come back, let's go back to the console here. And we'll look at this. So go into routers. Okay, both green, up and running, good. And then my endpoint, let's see here, that thing's been deployed. Skip demo Rebels Net has been deployed. That's good. We have, if we look at our edge routers, we have our edge routers are both up and running. The edge router policy is good. Default policy allowing everything to transit it. Good. So essentially, since we've configured the endpoint in AWS, we've got the edge router deployed, and we got our API created. Now we need to go back to NetFoundry and create a service that allows my laptop to get access to that private API. And we'll do that by adding a service. We just say simple service here. We'll call it demo private. And we'll say, we'll go back to our screen here. So this is the API. It's the combination of the API itself and the private endpoint, and then the execute API. And we'll put all of this as the URL for our service. So when my laptop consumes that, host name, it will go get it. So that's how that is. Put that in 443. How are we going to consume this? This is in the hosting side of it. The AWS VPC Edge router is going to terminate this. And we'll put it on TCP, same host name. Put a port in for 443. And that's all you have to do. So now we have a service created. So I have the ability to transit the network. I have a service, but I need an app WAN definition to give me access to that service. So app WANs, you notice I don't have an app WAN. And I'll show you how that looks. So in terms of, if I look at my Rebels Net network, wherever it is, somewhere in here, Rebels Net, I have no services yet. And that's also, you can see that in 0 services here. So as soon as I create an app, and I'll create an app WAN, this is essentially exposing services to endpoints on an identity basis. So I can call this demo API -app WAN. And what services? Demo private, endpoint attribute. I'll put in skip demos Rebels Net. A lot of groupings you can do with those as well. And I'll hit create, and I'll come back here, and I'll look. Okay, that already popped in. I got one service, skip demo Rebels Net, and I got that URL placed in there, 443. So I couldn't SSH to that. I can't get to anything but 443 in that VPC and that ultimately that endpoint. So that's good. Let's close that out. We'll come back and I'll get the full URL from this and we'll go grab this. Just show you how I can do it right from a browser actually. So I just copy that, come in here, put this into the browser. There, got the Petstor API. And you can go demo pets. And you get all the IDs. Then I can say demo pets 1. So that's essentially how you would go about setting up NetFoundry to give you access to a private API in cloud. And this works for all clouds, any apps you might want to just make private. There's no exposure from anything to the outside. So I'll show you how that looks if I show you my security group for the endpoint as well as this edge router. It's very simple. It's inbound rules, and the only thing I put in there is the VPC itself. So the traffic, the 172.31.31, it's the only thing that's in there. Can't get to it. It's no public exposure whatsoever. So I thank you for listening and participating, and look forward to talking with you out in internet land. Thank you.